You're disowned. Dad kicked me out in front of the whole court. He never expected a 4-star admiral to be waiting for me. The loudest sound in that courtroom wasn't the judge's gavel. It was my father's voice. From this moment on, you are no longer my daughter. Those words echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned toward me. Reporters lowered their cameras for a second, and even the judge looked stunned. Then my father pointed straight at me as if I were a complete stranger. You are disowned. You will never receive a single dollar from my business, my property, or this family. As far as I'm concerned, you no longer exist. And before anyone could react, he grabbed my arm, dragged me toward the courtroom doors, and shoved me outside. I stumbled down the courthouse steps, barely catching myself before falling face first onto the concrete. The doors slammed shut behind me. Just like that. I had lost my family. My home. My future. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. What my father didn't know was that less than 15 minutes later, a black government vehicle would stop in front of those same courthouse steps, and a 4-star U.S. Navy admiral would walk directly past him as though he didn't exist. Then he would hand me the keys to a government villa, a brand new official vehicle, and a future my father could never have imagined. The same daughter he had publicly thrown away would eventually become someone he could never command again. My name is Sarah Miller, and this is the day my father accidentally gave me the greatest gift of my life. People often assume that growing up in a wealthy family means you have unlimited freedom. The truth is exactly the opposite. Money can buy beautiful houses. It can buy luxury cars. It can buy respect from strangers. But it can also build invisible prisons. I grew up inside one. My father, Richard Miller, was one of the most successful businessmen in California. His company employed thousands of people, appeared in business magazines almost every month, and generated more money than most people could imagine. To the outside world, he was admired. Inside our home, he was obeyed. Everything happened according to his rules. Breakfast at exactly 7. Dinner at exactly 6. No discussions. No disagreements. No questioning his decisions. He didn't ask what his family wanted. He announced what would happen. And everyone accepted it. My mother had spent so many years living under his authority that silence had become her second language. Whenever my father spoke, she simply nodded. My older sister, Chloe, had learned the same lesson. She never challenged him. Never argued. Never dreamed too loudly. She followed every instruction he gave her, and in return she received everything she ever wanted. Luxury vacations. Designer clothes. A luxury apartment downtown. And eventually, an engagement to Austin Carter. Austin came from another wealthy family, and according to my father, the marriage wasn't just romantic. It was strategic. Two powerful families becoming even more powerful. Everyone congratulated Chloe. Everyone smiled. Everyone acted as though it were a fairy tale. I was the only one who noticed that my sister rarely smiled when no one else was looking. Sometimes I'd find her standing alone on the balcony late at night, staring into the distance. When I asked if she was happy, she'd force a smile. Of course I am. But her eyes always told a different story. Maybe that's why I made a promise to myself when I was 16. No matter what happened, no one would ever choose my future for me. My dream didn't involve boardrooms. It didn't involve million-dollar contracts. And it definitely didn't involve marrying someone because it made financial sense. I wanted to wear the uniform of the United States Navy. The first time I visited a naval museum during a school trip, something changed inside me. Looking at those photographs. Reading the stories of sailors who had crossed oceans. Watching documentaries about rescue missions and humanitarian operations. I realized that real leadership wasn't measured by stock prices. It was measured by service, by sacrifice, by earning the respect of people who trusted you with their lives. That was the life I wanted. Not because it was easy. Because it meant something. So while everyone assumed I was preparing to inherit part of my father's business, I was secretly preparing for the Navy officer selection exam. Every morning I woke up before sunrise. I studied until school started. After classes I trained until my muscles burned. Running, swimming, strength training, navigation, military history, leadership exercises. There were days when I thought I couldn't push myself any harder. Then I'd remember why I started. And I'd keep going. The only person who truly knew how serious I was my best friend, Emily. "You know your father is going to lose his mind if he finds out," she warned me one afternoon while we sat outside the library. I laughed. "He'll survive." She looked at me with concern. "No, Sarah. I'm serious." "So am I. What if he cuts you off?" I stared across the campus toward the American flag waving gently in the distance. "Then I'll build my own life." Emily sighed. "I wish I had your courage." The truth was, it wasn't courage. I was terrified. I knew exactly what my father was capable of. I'd seen him destroy business partners over minor disagreements. I'd watched him fire executives for questioning his decisions. If he treated successful professionals that way, what chance did his youngest daughter have? So I kept my dream hidden. Until the letter arrived. It came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. A plain envelope. Official government seal. Nothing flashy. But my hands were shaking before I even opened it. I already knew what it was. I locked myself inside my bedroom, took a deep breath, and slowly unfolded the letter. Congratulations. One word. That was all it took. My vision blurred instantly. I had done it. Months of preparation. Years of dreaming. Every early morning. Every sacrifice. Every ounce of self-doubt. It had all been worth it. Not only had I been accepted, I had earned one of the highest scores in the country. I wanted to scream. I wanted to celebrate. I wanted to tell someone. Instead, I quietly folded the letter, placed it back inside the envelope, and hid it beneath a loose floorboard under my bed. Because I knew exactly what would happen if my father found out before I was ready to leave. Unfortunately, secrets have a way of finding the wrong people. And mine was about to destroy everything I had ever known. I wish I could tell you that my father discovered the truth by accident. He didn't. Someone made sure he found out. To this day, I still don't know whether it was one of his employees, someone from the admissions office who recognized our family name, or simply bad luck. All I know is that 3 days after I received my acceptance letter, I walked through the front door and immediately knew something was wrong. Our house was unusually quiet. No music. No television. No staff moving through the hallways. It felt like the entire mansion was holding its breath. One of the housekeepers passed me in the corridor without saying a word. She lowered her eyes and hurried away. That had never happened before. As I reached the living room, I saw my father standing beside the fireplace with a folder in his hands. My folder. The Navy emblem printed across the cover felt like a spotlight. My mother sat silently on the sofa, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. Chloe stood near the window, unable to look at me. No one spoke. For several seconds, the only sound was the crackling fire. Finally, my father lifted the folder. "What is this?" I didn't answer immediately. There was no point pretending. He already knew. It's my acceptance package. His jaw tightened. Acceptance for what? The United States Navy. The room became even quieter. Then came a slow, humorless laugh. The Navy? He looked at my mother as though expecting her to join in. She didn't. He turned back to me. You actually think you're joining the military? I don't think so. I met his eyes without looking away. I know so. His expression changed instantly. The smile disappeared. You will decline the offer tomorrow morning. No. The single word landed harder than I expected. My father blinked. Almost as if he wasn't sure he had heard correctly. What did you say? I said no. He slowly placed the folder on the table. In this family, children don't tell me no. I'm not a child anymore. His voice rose. As long as you live under my roof, you'll do exactly as I say. And if your decision destroys my future? I decide what your future is. For years, those words had controlled everyone inside that house. My mother. My sister. Every employee. But something inside me had already changed. No. Again. Just one word. This time, louder. I decide my future. The silence that followed was almost frightening. My father walked toward me until only a few inches separated us. His eyes were cold. You think wearing a uniform is beneath this family. I think serving my country is an honor. Our family builds companies. And other families protect them. He pointed toward the windows overlooking our estate. Everything you see will belong to you one day. I shook my head. I don't want it. The sentence hit him harder than any insult ever could. You don't. He laughed in disbelief. You don't want a billion-dollar legacy? I want to earn my own. That was the exact moment I saw something I had never seen before. My father wasn't simply angry. His pride was wounded. He had spent his entire life believing money could buy loyalty. Believing everyone had a price. And now his own daughter was rejecting everything he had built. He turned toward my mother. Say something. She looked at me. For a brief second, I thought she might finally defend me. Instead she quietly whispered. Sarah, just apologize. Apologize? For wanting to serve my country? I looked at Chloe. She avoided my eyes. Chloe. She swallowed. Dad only wants what's best. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it hurt too much. No one asked what was best for me. They only asked what was best for the family name. My father walked behind his desk and opened a drawer. He removed a thick stack of documents. Business plans. Property records. Company ownership charts. I've spent 20 years building your future. He spread the papers across the desk. This company was supposed to become yours. It was never my dream. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. It shouldn't. I stared at him. For the first time in my life. I truly saw him. Not as my father. Not as a successful businessman. But as a man who couldn't imagine a world where someone chose purpose over wealth. He believed he was offering me paradise. He couldn't understand why it looked like a cage. The argument lasted nearly 2 hours. Voices echoed through the house. Doors slammed. At one point, several employees quietly disappeared upstairs because they were too uncomfortable to listen. Eventually, my father gave me an ultimatum. You have until tomorrow morning. To do what? You will call the Navy. I won't. You will decline your appointment. No. You will remain here. No. You will marry the man I introduce next month. I stared at him. I've never even met him. You don't need to. I do. You'll learn to love him. No. He slammed both hands onto the desk so hard that a crystal paperweight rolled onto the floor. You will obey me. I took a slow breath. I respect you. No, you don't. I do. Then prove it. I respect you enough to tell you the truth. His face hardened. I'm leaving. You walk out that door. He pointed toward the entrance. And don't ever expect to come back. I looked around the room. The paintings. The marble staircase. The expensive furniture. The home where every childhood memory lived. For a moment, I almost gave in. Not because I wanted to stay. Because I didn't want to lose my family. Then I remembered every morning I had trained before sunrise. Every mile I had run. Every sacrifice. Every dream. Dreams aren't meant to be abandoned at the first sign of resistance. They're tested. I walked upstairs. Packed one suitcase. Folded my Navy documents carefully. Took one last look around my bedroom. Then headed downstairs. My mother stood in the hallway. She reached toward me. For one hopeful second, I thought she was going to hug me. Instead, she quietly said, "Please don't make this harder." I smiled sadly. I'm not the one making it hard. She lowered her eyes. Chloe stood beside the front door. I wish things were different. They could be. She shook her head. You know, Dad. Yes. I picked up my suitcase. I finally do. I walked outside before either of them could say another word. Behind me, the front door slowly closed. Not with a slam. Not with anger. Just a quiet click. Sometimes the softest sounds end the biggest chapters of your life. I thought leaving home would be the hardest thing I'd ever do. I was wrong. Because 48 hours later, my father found a legal way to make sure I lost far more than just my home. And it would all happen in a courtroom, in front of complete strangers. 48 hours after I walked out of my parents' house, I found myself sitting alone on a hard wooden bench outside a family court hearing room, staring at a paper cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. I hadn't slept much. The cheap motel I had checked into was barely affordable, and every dollar I spent reminded me that my savings wouldn't last forever. I kept telling myself it didn't matter. In just a few weeks, I would begin my Navy training, and everything would change. I only had to make it that far. Then my father's attorney called. He said there were family matters that required my presence in court. Against my better judgment, I went. Part of me still hoped. Maybe my father had cooled down. Maybe he wanted to talk. Maybe somewhere beneath all his pride, he still saw me as his daughter. Looking back now, I realize hope can be the most dangerous thing in the world. When I entered the courtroom, my father was already there, dressed in one of his perfectly tailored charcoal suits. His lawyers surrounded him with thick files stacked neatly across the table. My mother sat beside him. She never looked in my direction. Chloe was there too. She gave me a nervous smile, but it disappeared the second my father noticed. I quietly took my seat on the opposite side of the room. The hearing began. One legal document after another was placed before the judge. At first, I didn't understand what was happening. Then I heard words that slowly made everything clear. Inheritance. Family trust. Corporate shares. Property rights. My father wasn't there to reconcile. He was there to erase me. His lawyers explained that he wished to legally amend every document connected to his estate, removing my name completely from any future claim. Technically, he had every right to do it. But he wanted witnesses. He wanted the judge, the lawyers, the reporters, even complete strangers. He wanted everyone to watch him reject his own daughter. The judge adjusted his glasses and asked calmly, "Mr. Miller, are you certain this is your final decision?" My father didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." The judge looked toward me. "Miss Miller, do you wish to respond?" I slowly stood. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. "I don't want my father's money." Several people looked surprised. I never asked for his business. I looked directly at my father. I only wanted him to respect my decision. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across his face. Not regret. Not compassion. Annoyance. As though I had ruined the speech he planned to give. He stood up immediately. His chair scraped loudly across the courtroom floor. "You want respect," he shouted. "You threw away your family for a uniform. I chose my future. You chose strangers over your own blood. I chose my own path. You chose disgrace." His voice echoed against the courtroom walls. People in the gallery began whispering. The judge warned him to lower his voice. He ignored it. Instead, he pointed directly at me. "As of today, I have nothing to do with you." Every word came out louder than the one before. "You are disowned." The courtroom froze. "You will receive nothing from me." His finger remained pointed at my face. "No share of my company. No share of my home. No share of my property. You are no longer my daughter." I could feel dozens of eyes staring at me. Some looked shocked. Others looked uncomfortable. A few looked sympathetic. But none of that mattered. The only people whose opinions had ever mattered were sitting directly in front of me. I looked at my mother. She lowered her eyes. I looked at Chloe. Tears had formed in hers, but she stayed silent. Silence. Again. It had become the language of my family. The judge tried to restore order. "Mr. Miller, that is enough." But my father wasn't finished. He walked across the courtroom until he stood directly in front of me. For one brief moment, I honestly believed he was going to hug me. Instead, he grabbed my arm. His grip was so tight it hurt. "If you're so determined to live without this family." He pulled me toward the exit. "Then leave." The courtroom doors burst open. A second later, I stumbled onto the courthouse steps. He released my arm with enough force that I nearly lost my balance. Then he looked down at me with complete disgust. "Don't ever come back." The heavy doors slammed shut behind him. Just like that, it was over. I remained standing there for several seconds, unable to move. The courthouse plaza buzzed with people walking past, talking on phones, climbing stairs, getting into taxis. Life continued. Mine had just collapsed. I slowly sat down on the cold stone steps. The tears came before I could stop them. Not because I had lost an inheritance. Not because I had lost a mansion. Not because I had lost money. I cried because somewhere deep inside, every daughter hopes her father will choose her. Mine had chosen his pride. I wiped my face with both hands and stared at the traffic passing in front of the courthouse. I checked my bank account on my phone. The number staring back at me made my stomach sink. After paying for the motel and meals, I had barely enough money left to survive another week. I didn't know where I would sleep after that. I didn't know how I would get to my Navy reporting station. For the first time since leaving home, fear finally caught up with me. Had I made a mistake? Was my father right? Would my dream cost me everything? I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. No, I whispered to myself. I've come too far. Even if I had to sleep in my car. Even if I had to work 3 jobs before reporting. Even if I had to start from absolutely nothing. I would never go back. Never. I was wiping away the last tears from my face when I noticed something unusual. The conversations around the courthouse suddenly became quieter. People stopped walking. Several security officers straightened their posture. A line of black government vehicles turned slowly into the courthouse entrance. The lead vehicle came to a smooth stop only a few yards away from where I was sitting. Its polished surface reflected the afternoon sun. The rear passenger door opened. A Navy driver stepped out first. Then, a tall man wearing a perfectly pressed white dress uniform emerged from the vehicle. Rows of ribbons covered his chest. Gold stripes gleamed on his sleeves. 4 silver stars marked his rank. The moment he stepped onto the pavement, everyone nearby seemed to instinctively move aside. I had never met him before. But I knew exactly who he was. Admiral Thomas Vance. One of the most respected officers in the United States Navy. And somehow, his eyes weren't searching for the courthouse. They were searching for someone. Then they stopped. On me. The moment Admiral Thomas Vance's eyes met mine, the noise outside the courthouse seemed to disappear. People were still talking. Cars were still passing. Camera shutters were still clicking. But I couldn't hear any of it. The Admiral walked with calm, deliberate confidence, his polished shoes striking the pavement in steady rhythm. Every step carried the quiet authority of a man who had spent decades leading sailors through impossible situations. 2 officers followed several paces behind him, but they never tried to catch up. They didn't need to. Everyone naturally made room for him. As he approached, I quickly stood up. Years of discipline from my preparation took over instinctively. I straightened my back. Squared my shoulders. Raised my hand into the sharpest salute I had ever given. Good afternoon, sir. A faint smile appeared on his face. So you are Sarah Miller? Yes, sir. He returned my salute. At ease, Lieutenant. Lieutenant. The word caught me completely off guard. I blinked. Sir. I haven't reported for duty yet. You will. His voice was calm but carried absolute certainty. Very soon. Before I could ask another question, the courthouse doors behind us opened again. My father stepped outside with his attorneys, laughing confidently about something one of them had said. Then he noticed the line of government vehicles. His smile disappeared. The attorneys stopped walking. Several business associates who had been waiting outside immediately recognized the Admiral. One of them whispered something to my father. Within seconds, his entire posture changed. He quickly adjusted his suit jacket, forced his most polished corporate smile onto his face, and hurried toward us. Admiral Vance. His voice suddenly sounded warm and welcoming. What an unexpected honor. The Admiral didn't even turn his head. My father kept walking. I'm Richard Miller. We've met briefly at the Defense Industry Gala 2 years ago. Still no response. The Admiral's attention never left me. For perhaps the first time in his entire professional life. My father was being completely ignored. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Sir, if there's anything my company can do for the Navy. Admiral Vance slowly lifted one hand. Not toward me. Toward my father. The simple gesture stopped him in mid-sentence. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't aggressive. But it carried the unmistakable message. Enough. Then the Admiral looked back at me. I've reviewed your file several times. My file, sir? He nodded. Outstanding academic record. Exceptional physical fitness scores. Leadership evaluations among the highest we've seen. I stood there speechless. He continued. And one particular result caught my attention. My father frowned. What result? The Admiral ignored him again. He reached inside his uniform jacket and removed a thin navy blue folder. I immediately recognized the official seal. He opened it carefully. Sarah Miller. Yes, sir. You achieved the highest score in the country on this year's Navy Officer Selection Examination. I honestly thought I had heard him wrong. The highest? He smiled. Highest. For several seconds I couldn't speak. I had hoped I had done well. I never imagined that. Around us, several people exchanged surprised glances. Even my father's attorneys looked stunned. My father himself seemed frozen. He stared at the Admiral. Then at me. Then back at the folder. As though trying to convince himself he had misunderstood. The Admiral closed the file. The Navy invests in excellence. He reached into his pocket. I watched as he pulled out a polished silver keyring. Several keys glinted in the afternoon sunlight. He placed them gently into my hand. I looked down in confusion. Sir? Those are yours. I stared at the keys. I don't understand. The residence prepared for you at Naval Base San Diego. My eyes widened. My residence? The official officer's villa assigned to your position. I looked up at him again, completely speechless. He smiled slightly. And before you ask. He pointed toward one of the black vehicles parked nearby. The new government-issued vehicle parked over there has also been assigned to you. I honestly thought I might faint. Only minutes earlier I had been wondering where I would sleep. Now I was being told I had an official home. Only minutes earlier I had been calculating whether I could afford another week at a motel. Now I was being handed the keys to a government residence. It didn't feel real. Tears began filling my eyes again. This time. For a completely different reason. The Admiral lowered his voice. I imagine today has been difficult. I nodded silently. Very difficult, sir. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Then allow me to tell you something you'll remember for the rest of your career. I looked up. The United States Navy does not abandon people who earn their place. Those words reached somewhere deep inside me. For the first time that day, I didn't feel alone anymore. Behind us, my father finally found his voice. Admiral. He stepped closer. There seems to be some misunderstanding. The Admiral slowly turned. It was the first time he had looked directly at my father. The warmth disappeared from his expression. I'm listening. My father forced another smile. Sarah is my daughter. I am aware. We've had a small family disagreement. A disagreement? My father's smile became strained. Emotions were running high. He laughed nervously. You know how families can be. The Admiral's face remained unreadable. My father continued. She's young. Stubborn. But she's still part of my family. The Admiral looked at him for several long seconds before speaking. I arrived 10 minutes ago. Yes? I also happened to hear what you said inside that courtroom. The color drained from my father's face. The Admiral's voice became noticeably colder. If my memory serves me correctly. He paused deliberately. You announced in front of a judge, court officers, attorneys, and dozens of witnesses that you had nothing more to do with Miss Sarah Miller. Nobody said a word. The silence was overwhelming. You publicly disowned her. My father swallowed. I may have spoken emotionally. No. The Admiral shook his head once. You spoke very clearly. My father opened his mouth again. The Admiral raised his hand. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to end the conversation. Mr. Miller. His voice carried across the entire courthouse entrance. You made your position perfectly clear. He stepped beside me. And now I will make mine. The entire courthouse plaza fell silent. Even the reporters who had been chatting among themselves slowly lowered their microphones. Every eye shifted toward Admiral Thomas Vance. He stood beside me with the calm confidence of a man who had spent a lifetime making decisions under pressure. My father tried to recover his composure. Admiral, surely we can discuss this privately. There is nothing to discuss. I was simply disciplining my daughter. The Admiral looked directly into his eyes. No. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. You publicly declared that she is no longer your daughter. My father swallowed. I spoke in anger. Then perhaps you should have considered your words before speaking them. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had happened inside the courtroom. For the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty on my father's face. He had built his empire by controlling every room he entered. By intimidating people. By making sure everyone else adapted to him. But none of those tactics worked here. Because authority recognizes authority. And the authority standing beside me didn't come from money. It came from honor. Admiral Vance looked at me. Lieutenant Sarah Miller. Yes, sir. Report to Naval Base San Diego at 0700 tomorrow morning. Yes, sir. You'll begin officer orientation immediately. Yes, sir. The Navy has already prepared your residence. I tightened my grip around the keys. You've earned it. Not inherited. Earned. There was a difference. A difference my father had never understood. As I stood there trying to process everything that had just happened, my father took one hesitant step forward. Sarah. It was strange hearing him say my name that way. Without shouting. Without giving orders. Almost. Softly. I turned toward him. For a brief moment, he looked like the father I remembered from childhood. The man who used to lift me onto his shoulders. The man who taught me how to ride a bicycle. The man I had spent years trying to make proud. I may have overreacted. Those 5 words surprised everyone. Including me. But they weren't an apology. Not really. He glanced around at the people watching us. Then at Admiral Vance. Then back at me. You know, I only wanted what was best. I answered quietly. No. He frowned. You wanted what was best for you. Not for me. His expression hardened again. Everything I built was supposed to become yours. I never asked for it. You threw away billions. I chose purpose. You chose hardship. I smiled. And somehow hardship rewarded me faster than wealth ever could. Several people nearby exchanged amused glances. My father's face turned red. He looked toward the Admiral. Surely military service isn't worth throwing away a family. Before I could answer, Admiral Vance did. A family is built on love. He paused. Not ownership. My father had no response. For once. Words failed him. The Admiral nodded toward the waiting vehicle. Ready, Lieutenant? I looked down at the keys resting in my hand. Only an hour earlier. I had been sitting alone on these very courthouse steps wondering how I would pay for another night's stay in a motel. Now I had somewhere to belong. I looked back one final time. My mother was standing in the courthouse doorway. She hadn't spoken a single word. But tears were streaming down her face. Our eyes met. Part of me wanted to run to her. To hug her. To ask why she had never defended me. Instead, I simply gave her a small nod. She returned it. Sometimes people say goodbye without saying anything at all. Then I noticed Chloe. She quietly slipped away from the crowd and hurried toward me. Sarah. I turned. Without warning, she wrapped her arms around me. I'm sorry. She was crying. So sorry. I hugged her back. I know. I should have said something. You wanted to. I was scared. I gently smiled. I know. She pulled away, wiping her eyes. I hope one day you'll forgive me. I already have. Because carrying anger into a new life only makes the journey heavier. She looked toward the Admiral's vehicle. I think you're going to do incredible things. I hope so. No. She smiled through her tears. I know so. We hugged one last time. Then she walked back toward our parents. Toward the life she had chosen. And I walked toward mine. The Navy driver opened the rear door. As I sat inside, I glanced through the window. My father was still standing exactly where I had left him. Motionless. Watching. For the first time in his life. There was nothing he could buy. Nothing he could negotiate. Nothing he could control. The convoy pulled away from the courthouse. I didn't look back again. The next morning, I reported to Naval Base San Diego at exactly 7 o'clock. Admiral Vance was waiting. He wasn't there to congratulate me. He was there to remind me that exceptional scores on an exam meant nothing without exceptional character. The months that followed pushed me harder than I had ever imagined possible. Every day began before sunrise. Every mistake became a lesson. Every success had to be earned all over again. There were no special privileges. No shortcuts. No one cared who my father was. In fact, most people didn't even know. And I preferred it that way. Years passed. Lieutenant became lieutenant commander. Lieutenant commander became commander. Every promotion came with greater responsibility. Greater sacrifice. Greater trust. There were overseas deployments. Humanitarian rescue missions after devastating hurricanes. Long nights at sea. Difficult decisions that affected hundreds of sailors. I learned that leadership wasn't about giving orders. It was about being the first to accept responsibility and the last to seek recognition. One afternoon, many years later, I was standing on the bridge of my ship when an aide handed me a visitor request. The name immediately caught my attention. Richard Miller. My father. I hadn't seen him in nearly 12 years. According to the request, his company had fallen into serious financial trouble after several failed investments. One of the government contracts that could save thousands of jobs required military cooperation. And the final approval had reached my office. I quietly read the file. Then looked out across the ocean. Life has an incredible sense of irony. The daughter who had once been told she would never amount to anything now held the authority to decide whether the man who had rejected her would receive the opportunity he desperately needed. My executive officer stood beside me. Commander, would you like me to schedule the meeting? I smiled thoughtfully. Yes. He nodded. For tomorrow? Tomorrow. He started to leave. Then I added one more sentence. And make sure he's treated with respect. The officer looked slightly surprised. After everything I've heard? I looked back at the endless horizon. Character isn't revealed by how we treat people who help us. I paused. It's revealed by how we treat those who once hurt us. The following day, my father walked into my office. Older. Quieter. Far less certain than the man who had thrown me out of that courthouse. When our eyes met, neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, he whispered. I was wrong. Those 3 words had taken him more than a decade to say. I didn't celebrate. I didn't humiliate him. Because revenge would never heal what had been broken. I simply stood, extended my hand, and said, Welcome aboard, Mr. Miller. As he shook my hand, I realized something I wish I had understood years earlier. The greatest victory isn't proving your enemies wrong. It's proving to yourself that they never had the power to define your future. The day my father disowned me, I thought I had lost everything. In reality, that was the day I finally became free.